Good evening, everybody, and welcome, or good afternoon, depending on where you are streaming into us from. Welcome to Stamola Live, and our back to school special. I know some parts of the country have been back for a while, but here in New York City, we just started a couple weeks ago, and I'm excited to be back in the school spirit. And I have been able to rope some of our authors and illustrators who make books for elementary age children to join me in a special conversation tonight about making books that highly engage our youngest, newest readers. We want to catch them while they're young. So before I bring everybody in, I will just remind you, for those of you who might be new and those of you who have been here before, that I am Erica Rand Silverman, and I am a literary agent at Stamola Literary Studio, and I specialize in children's books. Before agenting, I was actually a teacher for about a decade. I taught high school. And I realized I was an English teacher and a theater teacher, and I realized after a while that I really just became a teacher because I loved to read books, and I wanted to read books with kids. I didn't really want to grade their papers or educate them too much. I just wanted to read with them. And so I found my way to children's publishing and have been really blessed to be able to find ways to tap both into my love of education and into my love of publishing. And events like this tonight are actually the perfect opportunity to do that, to bring together educators and librarians, as well as bookmakers and booksellers and parents with authors and illustrators so that we can have a conversation together about books for children. If you have not already subscribed to the Stamola Live channel, you can do so. There's a button somewhere down there, and that will mean that you won't miss any of our events. Some of our events are geared toward adults, like tonight, but some of our events are geared directly to children. And if you subscribe, I suppose you'll get some notice in your feed that we have something new and exciting for you. Also, you can go to our website, which is stamolalive.com. And on stamolalive.com, there is a newsletter that you can subscribe to where we give notice about events that are coming up. And if you have favorite authors or illustrators that are a part of Stamola Literary Studio, you'll be able to find out when those bookmakers are speaking on this channel. So please go ahead and do that, and I hope to see you back again. I'm just looking in the chat, and we have people here from Florida braving the possible loss of their internet access. We hope you're all safe over there. People from Baltimore, Seattle, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and the esteemed Rosemary Stamola, who is the founder and esteemed agent at Stamola Literary Studio. So Ro, thanks for joining us. She's also the agent of many of our bookmakers on the panel tonight. Okay, without further ado, I will bring in the bookmakers and I will ask them to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their book, and about the local indie where you can find their book. So first, we're going to bring in Lola. Hi, Lola.
Good evening. Hi, Erica. Hello, bookmakers and educators.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll bring in the next person.
Okay, sure. So I've been in this wonderful business for 30 years now, which seems impossible, but I still get excited about each and every book that debuts as if it were my very first one. I have visited hundreds of classrooms across the country in all of these years, both as a visiting author and as someone who helps teachers with writing workshop. I'll go in and write with the students side by side, and I absolutely love that work. I write both fiction and nonfiction, everything from picture books to easy readers. I am working on some novels, but who knows if those will come to fruition. That's just something you never know. But tonight's book that I'm featuring is entitled Lift, Mix, Fling, Machines Can Do Anything. And this is just a great introduction to both simple and compound machines for students. And we'll talk a little bit later about how you can use this book effectively with boys and girls.
And what is a local indie bookstore if somebody wanted to purchase your book, which we
Well,
hope
I
you all
do live in
will?
the mountains of North Georgia, so I am not conveniently located to any, but the Little Shop of Stories in Decatur, Georgia is fantastic bookstore. And if they run out of copies, they are wonderful about ordering in more. So that would be my recommendation. Thank you for reminding me on that, Erica.
Sure. And I'm going to bring in Vikram Madan. Hi, Vikram.
Hi, Rika. Hi, viewers. Thanks for having me here. Exciting to be here with other bookmakers and talk about books. I am here with my book, which is called Owl and Penguin. So I live in Seattle. I do two things. I make books and I paint, and you can see some of my paintings behind me. So Owl and Penguin is my first graphic novel that I've written and illustrated. And Lola has been in the business 30 years, but I've only been in the business 3. So you might have seen some of my other books, which are A Hatful of Dragons. These are funny poems like Shel Silverstein, and the Bobo and Pup series, which is a graphic early reader. So I basically try to write books that are warm and positive and funny. And my hope is to get kids excited. They should have such a positive feeling when they finish reading the book that they want to go read another book right away, because that's what my childhood was like. So I'm trying to create that feeling for other kids in the same way. And so my favorite local indie is called Island Books, located in Mercer Island, Washington. And all my books are available from there, and you can order signed copies at any time.
They're wonderful too. You both are lucky to have such wonderful stores somewhat near you. Okay, I'm going to bring in Maxwell Eaton.
Hello.
Hi, Max.
Hi. My name is Maxwell Eaton III, but you can call me Max, of course. And Lola forced me to do the math on how long I've been doing this. And I think it's 18 years now.
Yay.
Seems insane. I live up in the Adirondack Mountains, sort of near Lake Placid. And I write picture books and graphic novels. My Truth About Your Favorite Animals series has been a recent one. And tonight, whatever it is, I'm talking about my most recent book, Bear Builds a House, which is a companion, sort of, to Bear Goes Sugaring. And our friend Bear here goes through all of the steps building a house, sort of an off-grid, very unpermitted cabin up in the woods. And let me think. Oh, my local indie is the Bookstore Plus in Lake Placid, where I used to be an employee, actually. I worked for a year or two, I think. So you can always get signed copies of my books there.
And I will bring in Shanda McCloskey. Hi, Shanda.
Hi, guys. I'm Shanda McCloskey, and I live in North Georgia, so about an hour away from Atlanta, not too far from Lola, actually. I haven't been doing this all that very long, but I started with my STEM series, Dolly 1.0 and T-Bone the Drone. Those I author illustrated, but since then I've done a good bit of illustrating, and so the book I'm gonna talk about tonight is Little Red and the Big Bad, not Wolf, but Editor. And this book pretty much kind of highlights how to write a proper thank you letter. And Little Red, she just writes her letter, just a gush of emotion, of gratitude to her granny for giving her this awesome red cape. And she goes to deliver it, but runs into the wolf. And every time he goes to eat her, he's distracted by errors in the thank you letter. So it was a really fun one to illustrate. And my nearest bookstore that I do a lot of stuff with is called Read It Again Bookstore in Sewanee, Georgia. Not extremely close to me, actually, either, but I also love Little Shop of Stories. And either one of those places, I think you could get signed copies.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for spending your evening with me here on Stabilo Live tonight. I was saying before I let you all in how excited I am to have an opportunity to not just talk books, but talk books and the classroom. And so I thought to kick us off, I'm wondering if you could speak a bit to who you thought your book would most attract in terms of age children, and whether or not you're finding that that is actually true.
Well, I'll start. I think I'm the illustrator of Little Red and the Big Bad Editor, but the author, I believe, definitely had a vision. She's a retired school librarian, so she knows her standards, it's just in there. She doesn't have to work too hard to get to those. And she, I believe, wrote this for, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. It's fun for kids, even if they're not in the classroom, but it's definitely useful for those grades in teaching them. So that was sort of our target market, I think. But we've already heard from third graders using it in the classroom, and it's being successful. Fourth graders, and I'll tell you, I have a seventh grader now, but last year as I was working on this book, she was tasked with writing an apology letter, because you know how preteens are so kind. So she had to write an apology letter, and I was so taken back by how much she didn't know about just formatting a basic letter. There was no greeting, there was no closing, there was no body. It was just all shoved up in one little paragraph. She typed it
Like a
on
text.
Yes, it was a text.
Like a text.
Oh my goodness. So I was like, oh my goodness, I'm working on the right book. And I literally went through the text with her, and she was in sixth grade. So there's that.
You're never too old for picture books.
Mm-mm.
Who else? Who else has had the opportunity?
So let me quickly. So just so you know, this book is not out yet as we are recording this. It's going to be out on October 11th. So no one has physically seen it except me and a few people at the publisher.
And now
So I
all
just
of
want to
you.
show you what it looks like inside. It's a graphic novel which is largely told through pictures. And there's minimal text in this book. And so when I was designing, this book has a long evolutionary path. It started from a painting, went through a iteration as a rejected picture book. And then I tested the idea of a wordless picture book with people on Instagram. And I got a lot of positive feedback saying parents love the idea of a book with fewer words, because if they have pre-readers or they have struggling readers, or sometimes they've got households where they don't, the parents don't speak the language, they can't quite read the book to the kids, or there are kids who want to read to younger kids. So a lot of people said they like the idea of having a book without words. So this book, Owl and Penguin, was originally designed to be a completely wordless picture book. And then, so the stories are very visual, and they can be interpreted by, maybe 2 or 3 year olds as well as older kids. And then when we decided to publish it, we decided to add a little bit of narration just to help kids along. And so all the words in the book are from a basic 300 word sight reading books. There's just maybe like 10 words in this book that are not on that list. For example, owl and penguin and ice cream. So ice cream doesn't exist on the sight reading words list, sadly. So the idea for me is that the earliest of readers should find this accessible. They'll be able to read this book on their own just by looking at the pictures, and then the text will, give them confidence in being able to understand what they're reading and read the earliest words. And then if they're struggling readers and they might be a little bit older, they might like it too. I did test the stories in school visits, and I found all the way up till 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade loved hearing the stories. So I guess it's a pretty universally elementary school book.
So much thought, in terms of the sight words and thinking about all the different types of families. I thought you were going to say that families just don't want to spend time reading. They
No,
like
they're
books to be short, which is what I keep hearing. But it is also true that for some families, it's really a matter of being able to access the story comfortably.
correct. And then the other feedback I got was from multilingual families. They wanted a book where they didn't have to, think too hard about how to translate it into a different language when they read the book to their kids. So having fewer words would make it easier, hopefully, for a parent to just read the story in a different language.
Yeah, it's so smart. How about you, Lola? Tell us. This book has been in the making for a long time.
It has. I sold this quite a few years ago, and the publisher was just waiting to find the right illustrator because, unlike the other talent in this room this evening, I am not an artist at all. And it was definitely worth the wait because James Yang just made this pop. So I think our general readership are the ages 4 to 8. And that's because, that's when children are really beginning to notice machines or things that move or have parts. And then they're really fascinated that something can make something else move. And so it was intentional from the get-go that would be my target ages just because of the content itself. And we all know that the early ages in the classroom talk to a lot about simple and compound machines. So I wanted something lively and jaunty that would capture their attention, engage them. And even though I don't like to do this, I wrote this in rhyme. And it's not because I don't like rhyme, it's just because I know that it has to be flawless to work well, and that is never, ever easy. So there are actually 2 books, and James has just finished illustrating the follow-up, which is all about light, called Oh, What a Light Show. So his art is, the palette itself is bold and bright, and the art is, I think, very engaging. So we're hearing a lot from 1st and 2nd grade teachers specifically, and they think it's such a great introduction because I give so many examples of things in our everyday life that are simple machines that probably children don't think of in that way. And so it's a great launch for teachers to have a table full of simple machines and then different parts that maybe children could make compound machines. And
Cool.
they always say a book finds its readership. And just like Vikram was talking, we'll never know exactly who enjoys and reads our books time and time again. But I think this has a lot of crossover value to a lot of different ages. But the target ages are right there from a little bit of preschool, but kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade are the strongest in the classroom for use.
I love I love what Vikram said about the book starting as a rejected picture book. I have a lot of books like that. I guess Bear Builds a House is right in that 4 to 8 kind of, age group. Probably skews a little bit older, 3rd grade and beyond. There's a lot of details and things in walking through, how a house is made, and all of the parts and the sections of it and everything. But what I kind of attempt with each of my books is at least with the addition of some humor, sort of cutting through more age groups. When it's funny, I think a younger kid can appreciate it, and even an older student who might be a little beyond that book can at least enjoy it. And then the other thing beyond humor I try to incorporate is a lot of detail, and sort of, I guess I kind of think of it as like levels of waves going, cutting through a book. You can read this, just the sort of narrative text, and it really skews a little bit younger. You can add the details as it becomes age appropriate, and there's always something to find in there. Whether you're just reading aloud or, or a child's just sitting there with it on their lap, just poring over the book. So.
One of my sons is a 6th grader now, and I've seen him go back to your books numerous
cool.
times. And I do. There are a lot of layers and a lot of instructional aspects to it, and so much to look at on the page that I think it's very satisfying.
And that reminds me too, like even the adults, hopefully, the teachers and the parents and caregivers can appreciate something in there too, which is a good chunk of it.
We're supposed to like them too. I believe it. So Vikram touched on this a bit when he talked about sight words, which I thought was so smart and important. And I'm wondering if anyone else here looks to sort of educational standards, or what kind of what kind of more official classroom vernacular or anything that might, like curriculums, are you looking to that work specifically when you write or illustrate your books, or maybe anecdotal with kids?
I do it mostly as a confirmation. In other words, I knew I wanted to write something on this topic. I go to the science standards to make sure that, yes, I'm targeting the right ages. When do they explore simple and compound machines? I don't think I ever start with the standards. I guess I'm too much of an emotional writer that when I get a topic or an idea, I want to run with that first. And then as I go through the layers of revision or formatting or whatever, if it is a nonfiction topic, then I will go to the math or the social studies or the science standards and just double check that I'm in the right slot, or aiming for the correct target audience, I guess I should say.
I'll say that, and I forgot to mention the author of this book. It's Rebecca Craft Rector. So I feel so silly. I forgot to say who the author is, but I'm sure she did have a lot of standards in her head as she was writing, only because of her background being a retired school librarian. But I didn't really, as an illustrator, I didn't worry about that so much. I just got to do the fun part. And but afterwards, we got together just over online, and we put together an educator's guide for this book, Rebecca and myself. And I was so surprised how many curriculum topics there were to be celebrated in this book, such as what do you call it? Not twisted fairy tales, but fractured fairy tales, and then letter writing and editing just in general. So in our one thing in our educator's guide is the critique sandwich, which is just, I use that with my real critique group. You say something nice, then you say something that could be improved, and then you say something else nice, you sandwich it in. And so I made a little presentation for kids just about editing. And so it's called Be a Rad Editor.
Shanda, in your own books that you did that have the STEAM connections, were you looking at science standards when you did those? I know that they've been recognized by National Science Association. So was that just
I
happenstance, or?
can't say that I was on it I just can't take credit for that. It just kind of was nice that it worked out. I mean, girls in STEM in general was And I have 2 daughters, and I love robots and science fiction and things like that. I watch Star Trek, and so, I wanted to, and when I went to look for like robot books for my girls, all I noticed was there's a ton of robot books. There's even a ton of robot books with girl characters. It's the aesthetic, the feminine aesthetic that I felt like was missing. So that was really my drive for creating. I wanted to make a girly robot. So that's really where that came from.
The one thing I'll mention that I feel is the process of creating the book is very organic. And if you too early in the process start thinking about standards and, does it match this, does it match that, I think that can kind of stifle the emergence of the book itself. What I find more interesting is once you've made the book is how people find ways to find connections with standards in it. So when I wrote this book, A Hatful of Dragons, it's poetry. It's people love it for the vocabulary, which is fairly advanced for elementary school. But I like the idea that there's a book you can grow into. And then to my surprise, I found there are these websites where teachers create resources, and teachers have gone and created like a 40 questions presentation and a whole document on how this book meets various standards. And so I found I didn't have to think about it. It's, the expertise to do that is already out there. And if there is content that kids like enough that they want to read it, then I think educators are really well positioned to figure out how to match that to whatever they're trying to teach the kids. So I feel that, even if I don't think about it too early in the process, there are people out there who will fill that gap nicely.
Yeah, I totally agree with Vikram on that, and sort of what Lola said before. It's, hopefully a book finds its audience. I don't. I've never gone into curriculum, anything, or standards. You just kind of feel that stuff out. And I also think if you read enough picture books, and you really get a feel for what'll work in an age group, I guess. And it doesn't hurt. I have a 4 and a 7-year-old, and they're right in the. Hopefully they'll stay those ages, because that's my demographic there. Keep testing material on them.
They better test fast. They grow up fast.
So then, what kind of decisions did you all make to have the book be engaging to these young readers? Some of it might be intrinsic to you. Some of it might be what you're learning from your kids. But I'm just curious, what kinds of things do you think about when you're making a book for an elementary school aged child?
Well, I think when it's nonfiction, right away, at least for me, I'm thinking, how will this become engaging? I know that we want to share some real information on that topic if it's nonfiction, but we want to showcase it in such a way that the child just can't resist it. And so, as I said before, for me in this particular topic and the one on light, I just felt like the words had to pop on the page, that the rhyme factor, if it was done well, would add also another layer of enjoyment for the reader. And to be truthful, it's a picture book. So the artist, it has a tremendous impact on how children view the book. And that's why I was delighted, that James was contacted and he accepted both of these books, because I think his art is the first thing. That's what someone's going to notice, is the cover of a book. And so, if this were just gray and white and showed a few machines, I don't think it would capture the eye of a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. But it's these bold colors. It's having, a rocket on the cover.
I was going to say, it's all about that rocket.
Yeah, right away. And so, both the front and the back covers are that way, but all the way through. So we have 3 artists in this room this evening, and they know the power of their art. And when you're simply the author, the writer, I realize and appreciate how much that artist brings to the page and helps just transform the book, transform those words.
I'll add that, yeah, so I did not write the words, and I think writing is way harder. So you don't give yourself enough credit there, Lola. But so things to make. I don't know. I think I just kind of focus on just a stellar character, somebody who intrigues me, somebody who I'd like to get to know or even be. So maybe that would connect with a child. And then I think any story where a child outsmarts an adult character or an adult figure is always fun. So that happens here. And he's in, the wolf's wearing skinny jeans. So, it's pretty sweater.
Erica, refresh my memory. Where we
So, like, Max, you said that you have young kids
Yeah.
and you think about them when you're making the books. But what do you think about? Like, what do you learn from them that you then carry over into your work? Or what else do you think about when you're making books for this audience in particular? How do we grab, 4 to 9-year-olds? What's the secret?
I think what helps me personally is my lack of mental evolution. I think I find the same things interesting now that I did when I was 4. It's animals, it's building things and making things. I'm doing sort of a nonfiction graphic novel that'll be out in May. It's a lot about making fires and things. It's the same things that always grabbed me. And I've been fortunate in the books I've done recently, especially, to just be doing books about things I'm currently interested in. And I think you can take almost any topic that you find interesting and make it interesting for any age group. I mean, it just depends on how, in the weeds you want to get on the whole thing.
I totally agree with you, Max, that I still like the same general things that I did as a kid. I love mermaids, robots, it never changes. So
I would say, I'm going to conjecture that any person who writes books for kids, whether they illustrate or write them, they have an inner child who's a very healthy reader and never grew up. And so we kind of, at least when I'm creating the book, if it doesn't appeal to me myself, I'm never going to bring it out into the world, right? So every book, the first audience for all my books is myself. Do I find it interesting? Do I want to look at it again? Is it funny? Will I approach this over and over again, and will I learn something from it, and will I feel good? If it doesn't pass that bar for myself, it's not. I can't expect it to pass that bar for anybody else. And every children's author and illustrator I've met, I think, has, as Max and Shanda have said, and Lola was nodding her head a lot. They are their own primary audience first. And I think if your inner child grew up, then you probably don't make books for kids.
Well said.
Very well said. And I love how, learning something from it, feeling good, reading it, finding humor, all of that I think is what, even as adults, what we want to get out of a book. And it's the same for young children too. So presumably you could be doing books for adults. Why children? And why young children? Why not teens? Is it the content? Is it the format? When I was a teacher, they used to say that you ended up teaching the age children where you had the hardest time. So I always say, oh, so I taught teenagers. I had a tough time as a teen. It was totally right on for me. Is there a truism like that in publishing about why you sit at the picture book or young comic table rather than the young adult? Not that you won't, maybe you will, but for now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never heard that, but I like it. It makes sense. I think that even in my free time, I will always pick a children's book. Just for me, I think it just simplifies problems in the world and answers in a way that, I don't know, grown-ups are complicated and life is complicated, and I like that. I don't know. I've always been drawn to that simplicity. It's just like getting rid of all the weeds and just being the essence of what you're talking about, or, getting to the heart of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I do it because I have so much fun doing it. In other words, I enjoy writing for children 4 to 10 or 4 to 12, simply because of their open hearts, their willingness to discover the world is this wonderful new place. I think it's a blast to entertain them, to sometimes inform them very subtly about nonfiction topics or in an artful way about nonfiction, to help them want to be stewards of the planet without hitting them over the head with that message, by just showing them the wonder of the planet. I too have just always been drawn to children's books. Even before I started writing them, I just couldn't read enough of them. So I guess what everyone's saying about that inner child is absolutely true. Maybe we are all stuck at a certain age inside of us. But I think having a readership, because I have visited so many schools in my career, and I see the power of literature for children, and just the right book for just the right child could make all the difference in the world. I think there's a small part of me that is hoping one of my books or a few of my books have done that for 1, 2, or 3 children. It's kind of a selfish thing, I think, but it also just is, I think it would be just rewarding to think that that might happen.
I think somebody asked me in a panel recently, like, what do children's books mean to you? And the word that instantly popped in my head was hope. And sometimes we say things without knowing why we are saying them, and this was one of those things where I didn't know why I said hope. And then I thought about it, and I realized that yes, the young kids are a pretty impressionable age, right? And every book we put in front of them at an early age is all about them learning about the world, them learning about positive things, them learning to filter information and figure out, how they're going to use it in their own lives. And all the knowledge they acquire, even if it's fiction or if it's just a funny book or it's a graphic novel or it's a nonfiction book, it's all preparing them to become, as Lola said, these folks who will steward the world in the future. And so for me, that's the hope, that we are inculcating every generation with the tools they will need to make this world a better place. And if we didn't, I think every children's book fills that niche. And I haven't, really seriously thought about doing books for older kids yet. I feel this younger age is more nascent, and it's where I can hopefully inculcate maximum positivity. So that's where I focus.
That's fantastic. But first of all, Erica, I had the opposite thing, I think. Like, I loved elementary school, and then middle school and high school were just awful. And so I think I never really moved beyond that first, second, third, fourth, I age group. I love it. And it's how it's just such a wonderful time in life, I think. So that's what I gravitate toward when I write. And I just love picture books and middle grade graphic novels. It's just kind of how it's just how I think, and I love it. And I love the format, and I love the 32 or 40 pages the picture book has to be, or even fitting a graphic novel into 160 pages. I just love playing with the format so much. And I think visually, and older books, they're wonderful, but books get less and less visual as you get older, and they're just so wonderful. And I didn't rediscover picture books until I was in my 20s again, and rediscovering them, it was just such an epiphany. But that being said, enjoying elementary school, I also think it's kind of when I dropped off reading wise. I think I had nowhere to go. It wasn't clear to me the path I should take reading. It just kind of left me behind, and reading wasn't something I picked up again seriously until my early 20s. And I was an English major, and and I still didn't enjoy it then. So picture books and graphic novels has been sort of my rediscovering of reading, and a absolute obsession with books.
It's really such a hopeful, inspiring, warm, satisfying, giving profession. I mean, is there anything better than when you wake up to a text from a friend who has a picture of their child reading your book and loving it, right? Or like a little kid reading your book to like an older kid, or a teacher who tells you, whatever, that your book changed some kid's life. It's sort of, I can't imagine how anybody else feels as good as we all do when those moments happen. I'd love to talk a bit about those moments. If you have specific stories or experiences of being in the classroom or library that have really stood out for you when you have gotten the opportunity to connect with children directly. Specific stories, or just what that has been like for you.
I think I know I have had a lot of specific examples, but the one thing that really stays in my heart is when I am lucky enough to go into schools and write side by side with children. And I talk to them a lot about writing something that is important and honest. In other words, I don't want them to look at writing as an assignment of something you just do to please someone else. And then as we mine ideas together and eventually they write, I've just seen those smiles of satisfaction, or someone pop up and say, I wrote something really great. And it like they're surprised. The child is surprised that he or she did that. And yet they're so proud. And I just think for me, that's heaven, to watch a child recognize that they do have the tools and they can express themselves in a meaningful way. I love that part. But yes, we all have the funny stories or the angst or just all those cute stories. But I think that's what I carry in my heart from school to school the most.
Go ahead, Vikram. Are you going to talk?
Well, so one of the things I do when I go to classrooms, or pre-pandemic went to classrooms, is I do this exercise with kids where I read a poem to them and ask them to close their eyes and imagine what is this thing I just described in words. And then I have them tell me what they thought, and I assemble a collective description, and then I draw that collective description for them. And then I compare it to the actual drawing in the book and show them how much more imaginative they are, because obviously all these fourth graders and third graders are going to come up with these really wild ideas, that authors probably wouldn't come up with, or illustrators on their own. And so they get really excited with this collaborative, imaginative exercise, because it shows them they can work together, they can come up with something new and novel. And then I do the same thing with every classroom, and then we draw these big pictures, and the librarians will stick them on the windows so that the whole school can come by and see what every classroom came up with. And it's all very different, and it's all very original and unique. And it gets them really pumped about the idea that they can think of stuff and they can do stuff. And I think they need those kind of you have to unlock those things in them to make them feel that they are as capable as anybody out there. One thing that used to hold me back as a kid was I would go to a library, and if I picked up a book, I could not imagine how a book is made because it looks so perfect, right? You never see all the pain and the hard work and the years of learning and trying and failing that went into it. So I could never see the gap between what I could do and what these authors could do. So I always assumed I was never going to be an author or an illustrator or an artist. And so I really try very hard in my interactions with kids to show them that what the path looks like and how they can walk it. And it doesn't have to be drawing or writing. It could be making movies or playing sports. It's always the same journey. You have to be better than you were the day before. So I carry those with me as, if I do nothing else in the world, hopefully I'll inspire a few kids to be really good at what it is they're passionate about. And maybe they will go on and change the world.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. It's so true. It's so true. I feel that way about anything. You see if anybody do anything. It's as if like they just always knew how to do it and you just don't, And it's so important for kids to learn as young as possible that anytime you see somebody doing anything, there was a process to get there. And there would be a process for you to get to, to become a more skilled person, anything that you want to do. It's that process, school visit is such an important one.
Yeah. When I read that question, I not the best memory, but the most memorable is so I was at a school visit and I do these STEM presentations, and this particular one was about drones. And at the end, I'll fly and flip this little mini drone around the library or wherever we're at. And there's 200 fourth graders in the room. And, I just was really struck, though, how cool kids are. You guys, if you've presented at schools, that they're just so kind and energetic, and their energy is just you soak it up and you're so excited for books too. You're like, I just came to the presentation and you've made me excited. But this time I was flying my drone around and they were loving it. But my controller, I think the batteries were starting to run out. And and so I didn't hit a kid. I know that's what you're thinking. I didn't. But I somehow managed to get it in my hair, and the propellers are wrapping at my hair, and I have to cut with scissors this drone out of my hair in front of 200 fourth graders. And luckily I have a lot of hair and nobody could really tell afterward, but they were so sweet to me, and they saw me on stage make that huge mistake. And I think they'll never forget me. So that's a good one.
I never heard that story.
Yep.
It's worth the risk.
It is. And get this, they invited me back.
Of course they did.
I can't believe it. But
You're a fantastic presenter.
I personally, I love seeing what how educators take your book and then talk about curriculum, work it into their own curriculum, And then especially when it comes to kids doing their own books. I did this Truth About Your Favorite Animals series, Truth About Crocodiles, Truth About Dolphins, everything. And just that's when I see a lot of where kids will make their own truth about tigers or whatever they pick. And it always blows me away. And the stories always crack me up. They're so funny, but also full of useful facts, and seeing kids like engage the picture book format, and make it their own, even when they're taking just some guy's book series, that I think is amazing, and I constantly get a kick out of that.
It's such a brilliant concept. It's so perfect for the classroom. I'd like to very briefly, because we're running out of time, believe it or not. I'd love to hear if you have any advice to speak to about what authors can do to prepare to have a successful school visit, and what you have found educators or librarians can do to prepare to have a successful visit, together or individually.
Go ahead. I never know when to talk. Let's see. My suggestion to authors and illustrators would be to, when you're putting together a presentation, there are some themes, reoccurring themes that students need to hear over and over. It doesn't matter what age. So it could be about, like editing, like rarely does anybody get anything perfect the first time, and seeing process sort of things like Vikram was talking about, seeing the process of the book. It doesn't come out like this right away. It just doesn't. And then things like, if your book has like STEM themes or writing or storytelling in general, just highlight those things that are just, anybody, you don't have to know curriculum and standards to know that stuff. It's pretty, So I would say that to authors making presentations for schools. And I would say some of the best school visits I've had are when the librarians or the teachers or PTA or whatever prepare the kids and let them know or research who I am a little bit. So I try to have on my website a little bit of things you can explore, a couple of stories from my childhood and tiny little nuggets like that. And one librarian even made a scavenger hunt for her students to, there were like questions, and they had to go on my website and look for the answers to different questions. And that was so cool, because they were like, you started a business in 4th grade and then you got in trouble, So, yeah, I did. So they already know you, and you've already got an in. So that makes it really special.
I would.
What she said.
Go ahead, Vikram.
I was just going to say what she said.
I was just going to say my one suggestion would be to, for authors and illustrators, try to make all your presentations as interactive as possible. For years before I became an author, I was a classroom teacher, and in our particular building, I was the person who brought in the authors and illustrators. And so I had firsthand knowledge of, I think, what to do and what not to do. And children are very perceptive. I know one time we returned from an author presentation, and one of my 5th graders said, "Gee, Mrs. Schaefer, I feel like I should have taken a checkbook with me." And it was true. This was a very well-known author, and all she did was hold up one book after another, give a synopsis of it, and say how much each book cost. I was appalled because she had gotten really good recommendations from other schools. So even if you're working a crowd of 250 or 300, which we all know is not ideal, you can still have an interactive element just by calling on a child to call out something here or there. Keep them working with you. And then I totally agree with what Shanda said, that the most successful visits are where someone has familiarized the students with some of your books, or they've gone to your website and read a little bit about you. You're just not going in there cold turkey. It isn't that you can't go in there and captivate them if they've not done any research. You can, but just like Shanda was referencing, it takes you a little bit longer. If they haven't made an initial connection to you in some way, then that's just extra time we have to spend doing that. But it definitely is the frosting on our career to go in and meet face to face with our readers. I love it. And like I said, I've been doing this a long time. I'm the oldest person in this room this evening, and I still love visiting schools.
I agree with all of that, of course. And then the big thing every time with educators and librarians is just, like, again, having the students be familiar with your work, and hopefully they've asked you to visit their school or library because they like your books, and just making sure that, you know, all the kids are on board with it is really so helpful.
So we have two questions in the chat. One is about you as bookmakers, and one is for you all as presenters in classrooms. The first is from Roxanne. She's curious what kinds of details the authors who have separate illustrators. I'm curious what kinds of details the authors who have separate illustrators map out in terms of the illustrations. So, for Shanda,
I think maybe she's talking about,
or Lola.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lola. This is for you, Lola.
Yeah.
I guess. Well, I try to hardly use any illustrative suggestions, and I think most writers abide by that same rule. If there is something that for historical value or scientific value, or because the illustration has to show something to bring a joke to the forefront, we will put something in brackets, and that's all it is a suggestion. But other than that, we're pretty much hands off, because the illustrator was not looking over our shoulders as we were writing the text saying, no, I think you want to change that phrase to be this and that. So we're trying to maintain the integrity of both professions and what they bring to that piece. So the artist, I've been blown away by my artists. They always add layers of interest and beauty, information sometimes. Like I said, if there's a joke, they add more to the joke or whatever. I don't feel like I have to give a heavy tutorial. That man or woman is a professional. If they take on that particular project, it's because they feel some connection with it, and they're already starting to imagine and think things through. So I try to respect that.
Vikram, you have your series was also, though you
Right.
do both.
So this one was illustrated. It's illustrated by Lola Schaefer. She's an illustrator who lives in the UK. So originally, when we sent this out, I was hoping to illustrate it myself, but the one editor who loved it really did not love my art as much, and so the books were sent in as a dummy, and I don't actually know how much of the dummy the illustrator saw. But as Lola was saying, sometimes in a book there is a key moment where you want something to come in the forefront, like a punchline or a joke, or the humor is dependent on having some things come across. I think those are really the only places where I kept an eye on it. But for the rest of the production of the books, I was completely hands off, and I completely wanted to respect the illustrator's expertise and let her. And she did a wonderful job creating these two characters
So
and
cute.
the secondary characters in the books. So I think the books are, exponentially better than how I was going to draw them. So
Do you have suggestions for in-person versus virtual visits? Is there anything people should think about?
So my biggest dislike for some virtual visits is when it's a webinar format where I cannot see the audience. And when you're doing that, you have no idea, how you can't read the room basically. So you can't tune it to the audience. You can't be as interactive with them. You really have no interaction with them. You're literally just presenting to a camera and hoping it's coming across the way you intended. So I look forward to the day when, we are back to more in-person visits. Virtual visits are definitely harder for that reason. In-person is much more interactive. You can see what the kids are doing. You can take real-time questions and stuff. So my suggestion would be for virtual visits, try to reduce the complexity of what you're doing so that fewer things can go wrong, and have a presentation that you can do even if you're not able to see the audience or interact with them.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Vikram. But also, it's still a very special visit, like make it just as special as you would if they were coming in person, because maybe that's in the price range that your school can afford, and that's okay. And it can still be magical and wonderful, and again, prepare those kids for the author coming, and I think that everything will go nice and smooth and lovely.
Maybe you can do it as a Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom across the board has been more successful and less problems for me. And Microsoft Teams, those are two that have been pretty good for me.
And I agree with that. Those are the two formats or platforms that have worked the best. And I agree with you, Shanda, that no matter how we visit boys and girls, we have to make it a memorable event, because for them, they are excited. I just did something online with some students in, I think it was South Dakota, not North Dakota, the other day. And one of the thank you letters that I got from one of the students, she just said, "You're the very first author I've ever met." And it went really well. But I also agree with Vikram that I've had to do the webinar version where I'm just talking to the light, to the camera on my computer. And, we do keep our energy up, but like he said, you can't read the room. And so it's never going to be as interactive as something like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with virtual visits, it really works well if it's a smaller audience and you can have two-way communication. That works well. If the audience becomes too large, like I've done visits where there's been 5 classrooms and then 40 students tuning in from home, at that point, it's really hard to interact with anybody. So if it's possible to have smaller audiences, that's a preferred format.
And I agree with all of this.
Debbie's wondering if you all feel pressure or compelled to write themes centered around mental health, anxiety, depression, especially since COVID.
I don't. I think there's a lot of people doing it and doing it much better than I could do it. And I appreciate those people because I have anxiety issues. My daughters do, but I definitely don't. I don't like writing about that stuff. I'm way more on the humor side of things. So I personally don't.
I don't feel pressured to do it. I think if one day it comes organically to something that I'm working on, then it was meant to be. But I feel no outside pressure ever actually to write on any specific topic. And I don't think that, I can't speak for everyone in this room, but I know that it would feel more like an assignment if I was trying to do something like that. And I don't think I do my best work under those conditions.
Yeah, it feels like, I'm sorry, Vikram.
Oh, go ahead.
And it feels like a backwards way to approach it. Like Lola said, I'd rather discover like, oh, there's a theme running through this, and it happens to be anxiety or depression or anything like that. I think that's the way to arrive at those things.
Right. I think if the topic resonates with you, definitely write about it. The other thing to remember is that publishing is kind of a slow industry. It can take 1 to 5 years for a book to come out. So if you're writing towards a topic that might be very timely today, it might not be timely 2 or 3 years from now. So another reason not to feel pressure, but to just go with what feels right to you.
I have a puppy visitor. She's here now. Well, we have gone over the time, and it is late, and I'm sure that people have families to get back to. So I will end by asking our bookmakers to share the educator who will be winning a copy of their book. And we can go, across from Lola to Vikram to Shanda to Max.
Well, I am happy to say that I get to share a copy of Lift, Mix, Fling, Machines Can Do Anything with Kim Alexander. And I look forward to connecting with you, Kim.
And Kim, you're on here, so I'm so glad that you get to actually see that right now that you win, and you don't have to wait till later to watch it. Congratulations. So I'll just say now, in case you're all wondering, I have your emails, and so I will email you, and I will get your addresses so that we can get the books to you. Okay, sorry.
And a copy of Owl and Penguin goes to Monica Deaver. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And look for it to come in a few weeks. It's not officially out yet, but it will be out soon.
And Shanda?
All right. A copy of Little Red and the Big Bad Editor goes to Roxanne Dixon.
I think Roxanne, you're on here too right now, so that's fantastic. Congratulations.
And any opportunity to just hold up the book.
You guys are doing a great job at that.
It always feels natural. Bear Builds a House to Elise Trevors. So look forward to connecting and sending the book.
Congratulations to all of you, Monica, Kim, Elise, and Roxanne. And I look forward to emailing you and getting these books over to you. And thank you so much, Lola, Vikram, and Shanda, and Max. Thank you so much for spending the time with us and talking about your books and talking about your experiences with the classroom. There's a lot of thank yous in the chat, so you'll have a chance to look at that when you watch the video. If you're comfortable watching yourself on video later, which I am not, so no pressure. And I am gonna do a sign off, but I just ask you all, Lola, Vikram, and Shanda, and Max, don't leave when I hang up, so that we can talk briefly after I let everybody else go. And thank you so much to all of our viewers tonight and to those who will come to the video later. Thanks for spending your time with us. And I know I recognize some of you from previous events, and I know there's a lot of educators on here, and it's your first time meeting us and joining in. So I want to make sure you know that Stamola Live has a series of videos that are great for adults, but also really wonderful for kids. During the pandemic, at the start of COVID, we had about 60 events within a 3-week span that were meant especially just for children who were locked up inside. And we all know tons of online events were sprouting up everywhere. We didn't know that was going to happen at first, and it was a wonderful thing. But these events still live on the Samoa Live website, and you might find wonderful materials to use with your classroom. So samoalive.com, you can go there and peruse all sorts of videos that you can use with your students, and you can subscribe if you'd like to be kept in the loop on new events, and you can like this video if you liked it, and you can hit the subscribe button if you want to subscribe on YouTube. All right, it's a mouthful, but I did it. So I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and those of you who are in Florida, I hope you all stay safe. And we will see. Before I go, there's 2 events coming up. One in October about H is for Harlem. And this book has received 5-starred reviews. It's phenomenal. The author, Diana Johnson, will be speaking to her publisher, Christy Ottaviano. So don't miss that. That's coming in October. And also coming in October, Lala Watkins and Angela H. Dale will be doing an event for children on Bus Stop. They'll do a live reading, and then they'll do a drawing exercise. So I'd love to invite classrooms to join us for that. Feel free to reach out via the Samoa Live website if you'd like your classroom to be a part of it, and I will be sure to share that information in our newsletter. Okay, that is it. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.